seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.
We're talking today with John Wells of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now John, begin with some background for us, and to start with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, 1930, and we moved to Muskegon, Michigan in about 1931 and lived there for about 5 or 6 years. Moved to Manistee, Michigan, where my father ran the Chamber of Commerce up there, and then subsequently to Grand Rapids, where my father ran the West Michigan Tourist and Resort Association. So
Okay.
we moved around a lot.
All right, but he's able to find work during the Depression, though, doing these things.
Yes, very much so. And in fact, when he worked for Goodyear, they sent cash from Akron to pay all of the employees in their store, which made them very popular with the merchants there in Muskegon because they were the only ones that had any money.
Okay, so you did a little better than most. Okay, so then where did you go to high school?
I went to high school in Manistee and Grand Rapids. I graduated from Central High School.
In what year?
In 1949.
Okay, and then do you remember much from the war years, or just?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, I have an older brother that before the Second World War, he joined the Army National Guard because it was a cavalry outfit, and he liked to ride horses. So then the Second World War came along. By then we were living in Muskegon, and he was still in the Guards, and he got called up. And he was stationed down in someplace in Louisiana.
Yeah, okay, so he would have been in the 126th Regiment at that point.
Yes, he was.
The infantry, okay.
Yes, he was.
They trained in Louisiana, and then did they ship him off to New Guinea?
No, because he was the colonel's Jeep driver. And he heard that there was an opening for three men if they wanted to transfer to the Air Corps. And he thought, gee, that'd be a little bit better. After all, the Air Corps sleeps in beds and dines in dining rooms and things. And it's a little better duty. So he transferred to the Army Air Corps. Subsequently was a flight engineer in B-17s. Shot down twice over Germany. Came home. He was a POW for about a year and a half, and he came home and went to college.
All right. So you were kind of paying attention to that stuff while it was going on. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. And then while you were in, so you told me, so you joined the National Guard?
Yes. Let's see.
Were you still in high school at that point?
Yes. President Truman started the draft up, but they said if you belonged to a reserve outfit, you couldn't be drafted, but you could be called up. And I thought, well, at least I, could finish school. I was still in high school at the time. Then I graduated from high school, Central High, went to Grand Rapids Junior College, and all this time I was in the Army National Guard, and I was in the officer candidate program, but Korea came along, and I thought, gee, I'd like to go in the Air Force. It's they sleep in beds, right. I found out. So I was able to join the Air Force and get out of the Guards a little early.
Okay. Now, what kind of training had you actually had with the Guard?
Machine guns. I was a machine gunner. And I loved it. I really did. But
And
I like the Air Force, too.
Now, did you get to go to like Camp Grayling or that kind of
Yeah, I
thing?
went to Camp Grayling for 3 summers and learned how to shoot a bazooka and a machine gun, and I liked it.
Now, did the Guard unit at that time have a lot of World War II vets in it, or was it?
Yes, our commanding officer, well, the battalion commander and our company commander were both World War II vets. So was the first sergeant, Sergeant Moorman, and our commanding officer was or Captain James Campbell, real nice guy, and so that made it easier.
All right. Now, was there a prospect of the Guard units being called up for Korea, or?
Yes, and it was Korea had a bad winter that one year. I mean, they were up there and by the northern part of.
Well, they were almost to China. They were up
almost to China, yeah. And it was bitterly cold, and so I thought, gee, that doesn't sound too good. So my father knew Soapy Williams, the governor, and he was going to have lunch with him one day. And I said, well, ask them if they're going to call up the Michigan National Guard. So he did, and Soapy told him he thought they were next. Well, they never did call him up. But I thought, gee, I better I'll go in the Air Force then if I'm going to go. So I did.
Okay. And so when did you join the Air Force?
I joined the Air Force in February of 1951.
Okay. And where do they send you for training first?
Lackland Air Force Base, yeah. And then after Lackland, they sent a group of us to the University of Southern California School of Aeronautics, which was up in Santa Maria, California.
Okay. Well, talk a little bit about the basic training at Lackland first. I mean, what did they do with you there?
No, it showed us how to march, close order drill. Of course, we got any physical problems taken care of, health-wise. We showed us how to take care of guns, marksmanship with the carbine, things like that.
Okay. How much emphasis was there on kind of discipline or spit and polish stuff?
There was a lot of that. Yeah, we had a tough sergeant. It was, but I didn't mind it because I'd been in the Guards.
Right. Now, were you kind of a step ahead of a lot of people because of that?
Yes, I was, and that was a good deal. So they put me, kind of the go-to guy to answer questions and stuff in the barracks. There was a problem.
Okay. And how long was that training at Lackland?
It was only about 8 weeks,
okay,
as I remember.
All right. And then next off to USC. Well, gee, you're being sent to college in Southern California. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it was. It was very nice. The people were nice, and we used to hitchhike a lot. We'd hitchhike into Los Angeles on the weekends and go to the USO in Hollywood. And boy, they always treated us to a wonderful dinner. And there was, then we, every so often, they'd take us on a tour of the studios. And I watched Bob Hope making a movie. And the people in Southern California were really very nice.
All right. Now, what did the training consist of there?
At, aircraft maintenance fundamentals, electrical things, engine, care of the engines, all kinds of maintenance, checking for problems, things like that.
Okay. And how much of that was hands-on work as opposed to classroom?
A lot of it. A lot of it was hands-on. We had to take an engine all apart and put it back together again, and then run it.
Now, were these all engines at this point for propeller planes, or were
Yes.
you, okay, so you're not getting
We didn't
jet.
have any jets.
Okay.
There were very few jets in the Air Force at that time.
Yeah, I guess they were beginning to use jet fighters, but anything else was still propeller.
Yeah, F-86.
All right. So how long did you spend then at USC?
The course was 15 weeks, and then and I got college credit for that too, by the way. And then after that, we went to Chanute Field, Illinois, for special training in R-3350 engines, which were B-29 aircraft engines.
Now, were these bigger, more elaborate?
Much bigger,
Okay.
much more elaborate, a different fuel system, things like that.
And how long did you spend there?
I think that was about 9 weeks.
Okay. Now, that's like Rantoul, Illinois, right?
Yes, it
That's
is.
kind of downstate, sort of
Yes.
middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it sure was.
Was there anything to do down there, or did you just stay on base?
Yeah, go up to Chicago on
Okay.
on a 3-day pass, sure. Or go over to the University of Illinois in Urbana and try to meet girls.
All right. Okay. Now, once you finish that program, now what do they do with you?
Then I was sent to George Air Force Base in Victorville, California.
And where in California is that?
That's out in the Mojave Desert.
Okay.
And I was there for almost a year, and I was the crew chief on a B-26, which was a light bomber, 2 engines, and I really liked it. It was a nice place, and I often we used to hitchhike a lot in those days, wear our uniforms and hitchhike into Los Angeles and go to a movie and go to the USO and things
Well, how
like
far
that.
were you from Los Angeles?
Gosh, I would imagine 60 miles,
Okay.
maybe longer.
So, and just a lot of that desert, or did it get built up?
Well, we went over, there was a kind of a low mountain there, if I remember right, and into San Bernardino, and then from San Bernardino we just took a bus.
Okay. So you weren't totally out in the boonies. I mean, you had a way to get to the rest of civilization. And,
Yes, yeah, that was good. I
maybe.
never went to Vegas. And then I got to, incidentally, I did get to fly a lot. We'd have an airplane down, not with engine trouble, some other base, and they would fly me down in one of the spare planes to fix it. And then I'd fly back on a plane that fixed.
Okay. Now, had you done flying before you got into the Air Force?
Almost none.
All right. I don't know. What kind of ride do you get in a B-26?
I used to ride in the back. They had a bomb bay. They had the pilots and a co-pilot in the front, and then they had a bomb bay, and then they had a gunner's position in the back, and that's usually where I rode. But I remember one time I was flying over some of the mountains down by Washington State. They had an atomic bomb plant in Hanford, Washington, and we would fly over there to kind of check out the safety procedures. And I did some high altitude flying, and I was on oxygen, and I fell asleep and pulled away from my radio cord, and they're trying to contact me to make sure I was okay, and I was asleep, and they almost had to land someplace and check me out. Fortunately, I woke up and caught it.
All right. Now, do you get to go home periodically while you're based in the States, or do you just...
Yeah. No, actually, the only time we went home when I was at Chanute Field quite often, because one of the guys had a car by then, and there were 3 or 4 of us from Grand Rapids. So we used to drive home on a Friday night and drive back on a Sunday, going about 90 miles an hour all the way.
All right. But when you were out in California, you mostly just stayed in California.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, are you following the progress of the Korean War at this point, or are you just ignoring it?
I just kind of ignored it, really. I didn't know much about it.
Because we were using B-26s over there, so there might have been some prospect of your unit going over there.
Yeah. Well, my unit was what they call a tow target outfit.
Okay.
But they mainly were doing checking out the area around Canada and the United States to make sure the radar was working all right, so they could catch which planes were ours and which were the Russians at that time. Russians had a lot of planes going on up there.
All right. Now, were you assigned to a particular squadron or unit at that point?
Yes, yes.
Which one?
4th Tow Target Squadron, and I was crew chief on one of the B-26.
Okay. And can you explain what a tow target squadron does? Because audience might
Well, all
not know.
kinds of things. We would tow targets for anti-aircraft and artillery things. I never went on with any of those things. So, but that's what we mainly did for anti-aircraft, not for fighter planes.
Right. But since you had aircraft, they used them for other purposes too.
Yeah, a lot of different
Okay.
utility type.
All right. Now, at what point do you find out that you're going to go overseas?
What happened was they would take 3 or 4 men from our squadron once a month, and they would be sent overseas. And gradually they got around to me. So I spent Christmas 1952 on a troop ship going to Yokohama.
All right. Now, what was that sea voyage like?
I didn't have any trouble at all, but a lot of the guys got seasick. They had these yellow, what they call GI garbage cans, and situated at strategic places all over the ship for guys that were getting seasick. I never did.
Now, was the weather bad, or was it just...
No, it wasn't too bad. It was just one of those things.
And about how many men do you think did they have on the ship?
I would say a couple thousand.
Okay, so it's a big ship.
It was a big ship. Yeah.
All right. And was it a military troop transport, or?
Yes.
Okay.
It was a military troop transport, but that particular time, the crew was civilian and the ship's captain was military. Then when I came back from overseas, I came back on a regular Navy troop ship.
All right. And about how long did it take to get across the Pacific?
2 weeks.
All right. And then they take you to Yokohama, Japan.
Yokohama.
And then what happens?
They took us to kind of a holding Army base there, and I can't remember the name of it. But we were there until we were assigned to our regular unit. And in my case, they put me on a train, and we went south to the island of Kyushu, to Ashiya Air Force Base, and that was my permanent spot.
Of course, a train would have had to jump to a different island, so you must have... Did you take a ferry, or
No, I
flew, or...
I think they had a tunnel.
Well, possible.
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Okay. All right. But it's possible. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's down in Kyushu, so this kind of far southern Japan, basically.
Yes.
That's where you're
And
based.
our base was directly across from Korea, from Busan, and it was only, not much longer than 50 miles to Korea.
Okay. And what unit were you assigned to?
816th Troop Carrier Squadron. They called us the Packet Rats.
All right. And so troop carriers, so what kind of aircraft did you have?
C-119s, which is a combination cargo and used to drop paratroops and parasupplies and things.
And how big was it compared to like a C-47 or something?
Oh, it's about twice the size of a C-47. They had a special, we call them clamshell doors on the rear of the fuselage, and then they had two twin booms for the tail section, and we could remove the cover from the back of the fuselage, and then we could drop supplies out the back that way. So a lot of different utility things about that plane.
And now, were you flying back and forth to Korea with those, or?
Yes. Yeah.
And now, did you do that, or did you stay on the ground?
Well, I did both. I was an aircraft engine technician, and the type they had what we call R4360 engines, two of them. They're 28 cylinders. It's the largest regularly manufactured reciprocating engine made, as far as I know. And so it required a lot of very technical maintenance, and I was a kind of a troubleshooter for that. And so if they had an engine down someplace in Korea, for instance, with engine trouble, they would, I ran an instrument called an engine analyzer, and they would fly me to where the plane was. I'd find out what the problem was, fix it, and then I'd fly back on the plane I fixed.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, what was the facility like in Japan?
Well, it was a regular Air Force base. It was a fairly large base.
And then did you get off the base or see much of the Japanese people there?
I got, well, you get a 3-day pass, and Japanese people were fairly friendly, although this was this particular area was a fishing village, and there wasn't anything going on there.
Yeah.
It was pretty quiet. But we had a nice movie theater on the base. We used to watch movies a lot. Bob Hope came there once or twice, and some of the other entertainers came.
And then what sort of impression did you have of Korea when you went over there?
Well, I never got off the base, for one thing. I was over, when I went to Korea, I had to fix an engine, and excuse me, then I would fly back on the plane I fixed. And there wasn't much time lag, so I did fly a lot to Korea and also up to Tokyo once or twice. But I seldom got off the base because I had to go back on the plane I fixed.
All right. Now, in May of '53, your tour gets interrupted. What happens at that point?
It was a Sunday morning, and every squadron in the Air Force has somebody in the squadron office all the time. And the guy that was there this particular weekend came in and woke me up and said, "You have to be in base headquarters at 10 o'clock for a briefing. And so beware, you better get there." And I said, "Well, is this Class A uniform?" And he said, "No, just wear your fatigues, but be there." So I went, and two other guys from my squadron also went with me. And Colonel Casey, the base commander, got up and said, "Men, you're going to a classified mission to a place in Saigon in French Indochina. And that's all I can tell you at the present time." But he said, "Men, I wish I were going with you." And I thought, we are in trouble. So about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, well, they sent us, they made sure we had all our shots. They had medics there to check us over, haircuts. If we wanted a haircut, they opened a barber shop. If we need launder any clothing or needed more clothing, we could buy it right then. Anything on the base was open to us right away. Then about 4 o'clock, we reported back to the flight line, got on the plane and flew to Guam, refueled it, flew to Saigon, and landed. And that night we stayed overnight, and the next morning we got up and found the insignia was changed on all our aircraft, and to a French insignia, and we were flying up. We flew up to a town called Nha Trang, right on the coast of Vietnam, and it was a beautiful French villa is what it really was. And everything was free, of course, or the government paid for it. We drank a lot of beer and went swimming and had a great time. And the next morning we got back on the plane and flew to Hanoi. And that was going to be our base, but it was also a civilian airport for Air France and Pan Am. And so we stayed there for about 3 weeks.
Okay. Now, at that point, what was your assignment? What were you going to do?
Just repair engines.
Okay.
If there was an engine problem, we'd fix it. We also helped maintain other things like gas up the plane and everything. But we had a number of specialists. I was an engine specialist. They had an instrument specialist, a propeller specialist, a bunch of different guys that handled different things on the airplane.
Okay. And this is a point when there's still a war going on between the French and the Vietnamese.
Very much so.
So what was the situation at that time?
Well, you could hear artillery all the time going off. And I never forget our headquarters room. We had a little room there. It was an office, and they had a map there of the area around Hanoi, and there was it was all red for Vietnamese, except there was a little white area right around Hanoi that was not red. And I said, "My gosh, is that where the Viet Minh is?" And that's what we called them then, Viet Minh. And the first sergeant said, "That's an old map. We'll get a new one." They got a new one that was a smaller area. I didn't ask any more questions.
Yeah. Okay. And then the aircraft you were servicing, what kind of missions were they running, or?
Just dropping, well, everything. Drop paratroops, take Dien Bien Phu, they were trying to make a runway there with what they called perforated steel plates. Mm-hmm. And we were flying those in, and you know, and then the French would hook them up and everything. Okay. So make some kind of a runway.
Okay, so you're there when the French were trying to establish the base at Dien Bien Phu.
Right.
And then their expectation was the Vietnamese would come out of the hills and get themselves killed trying to attack them.
Yes, and the trouble was, it was made kind of like a bowl. Mm-hmm. And it was, the rim were very dense forests, I think, or something.
Yeah.
And the Viet Minh were pretty smart. They pulled their artillery up around that rim, and then they were able to fire it down into the French. Were absolutely defenseless, and that was what happened.
Mm-hmm. And the planes that were actually flying to Dien Bien Phu, were those American Air Force planes, or what were they?
Yes, with no insignia, mm-hmm. with the C-119s. They were all C-119s.
Okay, and who was actually flying them?
The American pilots.
But were they Air Force pilots, or were they contract pilots?
Contract pilots.
Okay.
They were former Air Force pilots, but most of them have been in the Second World War. But just the nicest bunch of guys. They flew all our planes without a co-pilot, by the way. and they would come into Dien Bien Phu and come down and swoop down and get right on the deck, and then we could take the back doors off the C-119 so that when they dropped something, they would tilt the plane up and just slide out. They were on rollers that in the floor of the plane, and the rollers were made by Rapidstan here in Grand Rapids, and I got a lot of kidding about that.
All right. So it wasn't safe for them to actually land on the airstrip. They just swooped down.
Very
unload.
seldom landed on the air. They had C-47s, an older airplane that sometimes landed on the thing, but most of the time they would come in, drop the stuff off, and then just keep on going.
Okay. Now you said you started out working out of Hanoi, but then only for a few weeks. Mm-hmm. So why did that change?
Because it was for one thing, it was also a civilian airport, and there was a lot of activity going on. Partly because what we were doing was somewhat secret at that time, and partly because they were having trouble getting the gasoline in from Hanoi or Haiphong into Hanoi. The Viet Minh would blow up the train before they got there, so I think they decided to just move it to the French Air Base. And it was also more, one thing about it, it was safer. They could control everything better in Haiphong. I know one time, the trucks that we used for transportation were to go into Hanoi. We lived in Hanoi in a transit barracks, and they would take us out to the airfield every morning. And one morning I was sitting there at the back of the truck. They had what they called a tailgate right here, which is heavy steel metal. And I was sitting there talking to a guy, and I heard this ping, 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 ping. And I what's that? And I looked down, and there were 5 big dents in that tailgate right next to my leg. And I said, gee, that was close. That's about the closest I got getting into real trouble. But then they moved everything to Hanoi or Haiphong.
Right. Okay. Now, how was working on a French air base different from working on a U.S. air base?
Oh, good question. Well, every squadron in the U.S. Air Force had an area there. In my squadron, they had a tent that they had coffee there, and we'd sit around waiting for the planes to come back and stuff like that. In the French Air Force, they had a bar, mm-hmm. and they served cognac and wine. Really very nice, and it wasn't very expensive. So
I don't know. Does that affect job performance?
I don't know. It didn't affect mine. Okay. And we had metal steel barracks. They were the ugliest things you'd ever want to see. And one of our guys, and we slept under mosquito nets, and one of our guys was eating a candy bar when he went to bed, and he didn't want to finish it, so he put it up on top of the mosquito net to keep it away from the bugs. Went to sleep, and then in the middle of the night, he felt something funny, and the net was right by his nose, and he grabbed a flashlight, and he looked up, and there was a rat eating the candy bar right by his nose. He let out a scream.
Now, was it really hot in Vietnam, or?
Yeah, it was hot, and in fact, we were able to. Our uniforms were so distinctive. We were concerned, and so was everybody else, about the fact that it was dangerous. They wanted to shoot at us, Viet Minh, and so we were able to get French uniforms with short pants and short sleeve shirts, much more comfortable, and that's what we wore all the rest of the time we were over there.
Okay. And about how long did you wind up staying in Vietnam?
Let's see, little over 2 months.
Okay. All right. Now, when you left, had Dien Bien Phu surrendered yet, or was that still going on?
No, it was still going on.
All right.
Yeah.
And then, were you told why you were leaving, or were you just given orders, okay, we're going out now?
That was pretty much it. There was continually taking guys back to the home base in Japan, or at least to Clark Field, and replacing them. And one of the problems was there was a certain amount of dysentery and other illness problems. Fortunately, I didn't have any problem. But so, and I think they were limited to 60 days that we could be there. So they flew us back to Clark Field, and then they checked us over if we had any health problems, and then flew us back to Japan.
All right. Now, were you perfectly happy to go back to Japan, or?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I really was, very much so. And I think my parents were too.
All right. And once you got back to Japan, did you follow the news and pay attention to what was happening in Indochina? Or
Very much so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And were you surprised when Dien Bien Phu fell, or did that seem likely to you at the time?
No, I wasn't terribly surprised, because it was not well. I mean, those men were very brave. I had the most respect for those, particularly the French Foreign Legion guys. They were almost all German. The regular enlisted guys, the non-coms and the officers were French, but they were mostly German, and they loved the Americans. Loved us. We could not. If we walked into a bar to get a beer and there were some Foreign Legion guys in there, we couldn't pay for it. They wouldn't allow us to. They just loved us.
Okay. The French also used a lot of colonial troops there. They had Africans and things.
They have, yes. We had a guy from Senegal that was one of our drivers for, we had a Jeep that used to take us back and forth to the flight line, to the barracks. And this guy was from Senegal, and he was the darkest guy you'd ever want to see, and the nicest guy. He loved us. He loved the Americans. He loved the candy bars, and his name was Marmaduke, and he had a great time. And then when we went to town and came back on a GI truck, we did, or they'd loan us a truck when we'd go into town once in a very great while. And if it was coming back, just as it was getting dark, we had to stop at several checkpoints and give them the password. Well, the password was always a number, and it was in French, and nobody could remember that number. And those Senegalese guys, they used to just shake their heads and laugh and say, "Go on, Americans, you're okay."
Now, did you see much of the Vietnamese people?
Yes, they were very friendly. And the young people particularly wanted to practice their English on us. We wore French uniforms, and but they knew we were Americans, and they were just could not be nicer.
So you didn't have the sense that that group had anything in particular against you?
Not a bit. Not a bit.
All right. Now, in what capacity would you meet Vietnamese? Would you just be in the town, or would they be on the base? Or
Well, pretty much in town. and because the children like to practice their. They learned English in school, and they like to practice their English.
All right. Now you go back to Japan. You've got a number of months left back there. And now, does that go back to your routine? At some point, the Korean War kind of winds down, or there's an armistice. Does that change what you're doing?
Yeah. More and more, we were concerned about Vietnam than Korea, and we had planes flying back and forth, supplying. One of the things I had to do as an engine technician, I had to change the engine on one of these planes. And it's a huge engine, 28 cylinders. Boy, it's just this big. And I changed it in a week. And that went very well.
Now, to change an engine is just physically take it off the plane and put a new one on, or are you rebuilding it?
I had to rebuild it.
Okay.
The engine we got was supposed to be rebuilt, and it wasn't. So I had to take the starter and the fuel pump and that sort of thing, and put it on the new engine.
All right. Now, are there other particular things that kind of stand out in your mind about the time that you spent in Japan that you haven't brought into the story yet?
No, I don't like Japanese food.
Okay.
We lived in a fishing village, and it was a very poor village, and I was not in any hurry to try out their food. And other than that, I never got to Tokyo much, or I never got off the base very much.
All right.
But I did. When I did, we'd stop in a bar someplace and have some beer or something. But they had a curfew from I think 11 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning, that you had to be off the street. And the town that we were in was so poor, and it wasn't very clean, and I just didn't go into town very much.
Okay. And so now you go back to the States, and it's another sea voyage. Was that easier or harder than the other one, or?
No, the other one was hard because, geez, I spent Christmas on the troop ship, and darn it, that's tough, But coming home, I'll tell you, I still get a lump in my throat every time I think about going under that San Francisco Bay Bridge. And our troop ship went up to the bridge, and as we went underneath it, all of the ships in the harbor started blowing their horns and shooting streams of water way up in the air. And then we got up to the dock, and the band played California, Here I Come. I still get a lump in my throat.
Okay, so you got a proper welcome home when you arrived.
You bet. You
bet. Now, you've still got time left on your enlistment, right?
Yes.
When you get back. And so what do they do with you now?
Yeah, they sent me to Hill Air Force Base, Utah. And I was there for actually, I was only there about a year, and I got an early release to go back to college.
And what were you doing at Hill Air Force Base?
The same thing, engine technician.
And was there much going on there? Was there a lot of activity or not?
Oh, no, it was a very busy base, and surfacing aircraft, gassing them up, things like that.
Now, were you still with transport aircraft? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I say yeah. I was in a squadron that had various types. They had a B-20, I think they had a couple of B-29s, B-26s, C-40, B-45s, jets. Jets were just starting to come in. And I hadn't gone to jet engine school, so I didn't have to service any of them.
Okay. Now, at this point, were you encouraged to stay in the Air Force, or were they trying to get people out?
Yeah, in a way they did, but actually my enlistment was up in, I think, February. Yeah, I was up in February, and I was able to get an early discharge to go back to school at the end of January, which is what the semester break was. So I got out a little early.
Okay. And then what kind of career do you go into then? You go to school, what do you do?
I was interested in optometry. And we had a family friend that was an optometrist. And so I visited the Illinois College of Optometry in Chicago on the way home, one time, and they accepted me right away because I had all of the prerequisites, and so they signed me up, and that fall I enrolled in the Illinois College of Optometry and was there for 3 years, and now it's 4. And then I came back to Grand Rapids and started my own practice, and I shared an office with Dr. Jim Ford, who was Jerry Ford's younger brother, and he was a good friend. We knew each other pretty well, and we decided we could share an office, and so he could take time off and play golf, and so I would cover for him, Okay.
And that's a practice that's still going on, right? Because his son is
still
doing is my eye doctor. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Greg, yeah. Sure.
All right. Now, to look back at the time that you spent in the Air Force, what do you think you took out of it, or what effect did that have on you?
Well, I still respect the Air Force very much. We had, for the most part, wonderful officers and enlisted men, and I was given a lot of responsibility, and I appreciated it, and that's what made me want to become an optometrist. I wanted to be my own boss, and they encouraged that.
All right. Well, it makes for a good story and certainly an unusual one, so thanks for coming in and sharing it today.
Well, thank you for the interview.
I never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.